Okay, we haven't looked at a TV in a while, so here's a 17-inch Motorola black and white from about 1955, housed in a metal cabinet. A friend of mine picked this up at an estate sale, and I think he might have paid a tad bit too much for it, but I went ahead and got it from him anyway, since these don't show up that often. For the exception of a Zenith Bug-Eye that I picked up a few years ago, the last metal cabinet black and white TV that I found around here was probably in the late 90s, I'd guess. You know, for the most part, when the televisions would fail, people just threw them away, for the exception of the big consoles, and people kept them either for the nice cabinet or because they were too heavy to move by themselves. So let's see what we've got here. This is a Motorola model 17T20, and just looking at the chassis, I can tell that this was probably a lower end set. Does not use a power transformer, so therefore it's a series string chassis. First observations I notice is that the picture bulb has been replaced. It has a Dumont picture bulb in it. And at some point the housing on the deflection yoke disintegrated, and you can see they patched that up with masking tape. The horizontal output transistor bulb is gone to air, as can be seen by this white spot. The damper transistor bulb is a Raytheon replacement, probably from the late 60s, early 70s, judging by the logo. So, you know, I'd guess this set was probably in use up until the 1970s. You got to remember, back then TVs were expensive and people were not as picky about what they'd own, so it wasn't nothing for one of these old sets to see 20 or 25 years use before it was replaced. Okay, now let's check the picture bulb and see if it's any good. I'm holding my breath here. Well, I was going to test this on my Syncor CR70 CRT tester that I recently obtained, but it's wanting to misbehave. It's not outputting any filament voltage. So I dug up this old B&K relic from the 1960s. In fact, my first CRT tester was one just like this that was given to me by a TV shop that no longer needed it. It does okay for testing old CRTs in black and white and color sets, but I wouldn't recommend it to rejuvenate one, since it uses an atomic blast rejuvenator. And unfortunately, this tube is basically dead on emission. It just barely moves the needle. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to let it cook a while and see if it'll come up. Oftentimes these tubes, after they've been sitting for decades, will drop down, but they'll wake up if you give them a good cooking for a half hour or so. So let's just bump the filament voltage up a little bit. And just let it sit there a while. Well, just my luck, trying to cook the tube at 8 volts, which I've done 10 million times, and the damn filament opened up. It's just always my luck on the sets that I overpay for. Something like this happens. And if it had been something that somebody gave me, the tube would have checked perfect in it, but oh well, I just wasted money. Might as well throw this set in the dump. Okay, now that I've kind of cooled down, I removed the base from the CRT because sometimes the leads can break off inside of the base. But unfortunately, as you can see on the meter, we have no continuity. So the CRT filament is indeed wide open. However, I have one last little trick up my sleeve. It's a long shot, but it might do the trick. Might solve our problem. Here we have the special Radio TV Phono-Nut approved capacitor discharge unit. I have this capacitor charged up to about 400 volts, connected across the CRT filament. We're going to flip this switch and see if it'll weld the filament back together. Now I got to figure out how I can do this and hold the camera at the same time. I might not be able to. Okay, I flipped the switch and you didn't miss any excitement, nothing sparked. So let's tap on the neck of the CRT and see if the vibration of the filament will make enough contact to weld it back together. Okay, here we go. Ooh, it flashed. It flashed. Let's see if we have filament continuity now. Well, unfortunately, no luck. I measured the voltage across the capacitor just before I started tapping on it. We were only at about 300 volts. So I'm going to recharge the capacitor up to a higher voltage and we're going to tap it again. And for charging the capacitor, I'm just using the capacitance tester here. Just connect the capacitor, flip the switch on, throw it up to the voltage that I want to charge it to, flip the switch off, connect it to the CRT, flip the switch on, and start beating on the neck again. I got it to flash a second time, but I doubt it took because we're only reading 14 volts across the capacitor, and had it took, the filament would have drained the capacitor down to 0. Okay, it still didn't take, but I'm not giving up yet. We have a 22 microfarad capacitor that we're currently using. I'm going to bump that up to a much bigger value. I mean, at this point, we can't hurt anything. Okay, we now have 68 microfarad across here. It flashed a little brighter that time. And we're reading 0 volts across the capacitor this time, so there's a chance that the weld might have took. Well, look at that, 1.1 ohm. I believe that's what it read whenever I checked it the first time before the filament opened up. So let's hook the CRT tester back up, see what happens. Well, that was a no-go. I applied 6.3 volts from the CRT tester and the filament popped like a flash bulb, so there's no saving this tube. So unless I can come up with a good 17 HP4 CRT at a reasonable price, this set will be destined for the junk pile. I'm going to hang on to it a little while. I've got too much money in this set just to throw it away. But you know, I'm still ticked off about this situation. I'm also ticked off that I was stupid enough to pay this much money for this set, sight unseen, but I'll learn in the future. $5 or $10, that's maximum, unless I can check the CRT and kind of eyeball the chassis before purchase. I mean, radios and phonographs, you know, that's not quite as risky, but something like a TV, there's just too much risk involved. So, you know, let this be a lesson for all of you potential TV collectors out there. Don't make the same mistake I did and spend too much money on something and it turn out to have a dud CRT or some other major unobtainable part. In fact, I'm going to tell my friend no more televisions unless they're $5 or $10. You know, I can gamble that much, but nothing any higher than that. You know, this business of paying big money for a television only to get it home and discover the CRT is a dud. But anyway, sorry this one didn't work out. Maybe it'll work out down the road, but not now. Hopefully the next video will be more of a success story. But until that time, behave yourself. Don't get arrested, and more to come later.